But yeah, when you got to the end, it was like, bodies and staircases, hidden tunnels. They doing laboratory research. Like it was. When the book took off, like it took off, like it went, and it did not stop. Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us once again. My name is Chris Colston. I'm here with Isaiah Tukes, Kimberly Lake, and Laria Reed, and we are Four Friends in a Book. So Four Friends in a Book is our monthly podcast series where we have a discussion centered around a book that we're reading together, and we also talk about any current or relevant topics that may or may not relate to that book. So somewhat of a book review mixed with just table talk amongst friends. So for our Four Friends crew that's already with us, we thank you guys. We appreciate your support. Please continue to share with your friends and family if you're enjoying the podcast. And for those that are new to our channel, please like, share, subscribe, follow us on all social media platforms. We would love to hear from you guys on any book recommendations you may have. Any topics you want us to discuss here on Four Friends in a Book podcast. So again, thank you for tuning in with us. So let's jump right into it. So the book for this month is within that suspense thriller category, When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. Set in kind of present time or present day setting within Brooklyn, New York. The main character, Sydney, is moving back home. She's going back. She's recently gone through a divorce. So she's moving back into her brownstone with her mother. And she's really just noticing how the neighborhood is changing, how it's evolving. It's not the same place she knew when she grew up. It's going through this whole process of gentrification. New neighbors are moving in. Old neighbors that have historically been there are moving out. And so the book takes you on this journey over that overall process of gentrification, and then it take you beyond that as well. Like I said, it's in that suspense, that thriller, that mystery category. And so with that being said, what were you guys' overall takeaway? Well, not takeaway. What were your thoughts about the novel When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole? Did you guys find it to be an easy read? I know this may not have been your favorite genre of books, but was it an easy read for you? Did it just flow naturally? Did you enjoy it? Just what were your thoughts overall about the book? And we're gonna start with Miss Lake over here.
Okay, for me, I thought the novel was just okay. I love suspense and thriller. But the book for me did start off a bit slow. And then at the end, it was just like so much happened in such a short period of time. And the stuff that was happening was like so crazy. So that the ending kind of took me out of the book a bit as well. So for me, I didn't think it was like the most horrible book in the world. But for me, I would put it, it just okay.
Okay. Isaiah, what were your thoughts about the book When No One Is Watching?
My thoughts are, I don't think it was actually just a bad book. It just was a difficult read, as Kim said, for me. To be honest, the book started out really slow. It was hard to transition from chapter to chapter because I actually kept losing focus on what was actually going on with the book. I was expecting this book to be a thriller because it was advertised as a thriller, but it was more of a romance novel and a long way from a thriller. The relationship between Theo and Sydney was predictable, and their relationship became like the bulk of the story rather than this being a thriller. And, as Kim said, like it was like a really difficult read. And then once you actually got towards the end of the book, it just took you on like really, really high roller coaster and then just dropped you off on a cliff. And I don't know actually how I got to that cliff. So that's what I was saying. It was just basically difficult. Like what happened from the beginning that got me to this cliff and it just mellowed out. So it was a very difficult read for me to understand what was going on.
All right, Laria, what was your thoughts? What's your take on this book?
Okay, so I normally don't read thrillers, suspense books. I'm all about biographies, memoirs, like history, facts. Um, I'm all along those lines. So for me, I was kind of like, okay, it's gonna be new, it's gonna be cool. It was a lot of information. You really had to pay attention if you're reading it or listening to it on Audible of what was happening. But what it reminded me of was Tyler Perry's movies. You know, or his sitcom, what's the Tyler Perry movie that sitcom that comes on BET? I forgot. But anyway, it always has like at the end like 20 million things happen, and you're like, what? So like the last two, 3 chapters, well, 2 chapters or whatever, it was just like boom, 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 boom. But we hadn't, and it was so slow starting. So I agree with them. It was not a bad book. I think that everyone should read it. Melissa Cole is Tyler Perry's first cousin in my mind, the way she writes.
Okay.
And it was kind of telenovela, sitcom-ish Tyler Perry. You know, so if you like that kind of stuff, you'll really enjoy this book. I'm more of a gonna tell me what I need to know, build me up really quickly and get me to the point. She didn't do that. She was kind of slow with it. So, but the knowledge that she dropped about gentrification, I really enjoyed. So it was cool. It was cool. It was different, but it was cool. Different isn't always bad.
All right, so
That's true.
it appears that the consensus was the book was a little different. It was maybe non-traditional or a little, I guess, outside of what was expected. So I listened on Audible.
You looking up like,
Yeah, I'm trying to find a word. So to me, it wasn't a bad book. I listened on Audible, so I didn't actually read it. So I was kind of hearing the words, and the one thing I did appreciate was I think it was narrated very well. So I actually like the people that narrated the book. I've listened to some, and the person was just very monotone. They didn't really speak well. So whoever was reading or narrating the book, the 2 characters for this Audible episode did a pretty good job. The book had a history to it, and so I love history, so I was kind of pulled in by that. It talks about the neighborhood that she grew up in, Giffords Place, and just kind of gives the history. Sydney's on this journey to try to do a neighborhood tour and give all this back information, and it kept building up. And like I said, it took off in leaps and bounds. And yeah, it was a little confusing at times. Like Isaiah mentioned, some of the stuff was predictable. He mentioned, like I said, she had just gone through a divorce. Then she, gets with Theo and all his little stuff going on, and then it take off and go left. But yeah, I don't particularly like thrillers, so it was new for me. So like I said, I don't really have a good comparison to relate it to, but I did enjoy the book. Like I said, it had a lot of good points, had a lot of relevant topics, even for what we see today, with the whole process of gentrification, especially in New York, with the brownstones and how the prices have skyrocketed in those areas. But yeah, it was a lot. I won't necessarily call it slow, but it kind of crept there, and then it flew off the pages, the book, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah. All right. So even with so we talk about these characters. So Sydney again is a main character within the book, and then it transitions to my boy Theo.
Wow.
So Theo, white guy, he has an apartment, I think, in the same neighborhood with his girlfriend. And him and his girlfriend, they hit a rough patch. They going through it, and they basically on their last leg as far as their relationship. And then it becomes kind of an interest between Sydney and Theo, and the book kind of goes back and forth as far as those 2 different perspectives. So even on this journey, like I said, we've all mentioned that it kind of it just takes off and skyrockets. But I guess what character or what perspective from the book that you guys kind of, I guess, find more interesting or were more drawn into as you read the book or listened on Audible? Like, what were your thoughts about that? Isaiah, you want to start?
Okay. Yes. This is the first book that I read that I really did not have a favorite character. From reading this book, they was both all on the same playing field. With Sydney, she was, kind of the harsh, brash, and angry and difficult, basically to get along with. Theo was basically a doormat and did everything that Sydney told him to actually do. The ending, like I stated, went downhill, from nowhere. It took us like on an actual roller coaster. I really did. It wasn't a good synopsis for me to understand how I actually got to that climax. It was just basically like you started out slow. It was a very speed hill going down a roller coaster, and I don't know how I actually got to the end of this roller coaster. But like you say, it wasn't a bad book. It was just basically difficult for me to keep up because between the transition of the chapters and the going through the main characters, they never picked up where they actually left off. That like they just changed to a totally different subject, and a lot of stuff basically didn't reiterate a lot of the things that they was talking about, which was some very important facts. So that's what was difficult for me to keep up and just keep going through what was going on within the book.
So let's transition a little bit. So we read this book When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. And one of the primary emphasis or topics that was really heavily pushed throughout this book was this whole concept of gentrification. So I think we're all kind of familiar with what gentrification is. It's essentially the process where you go into impoverished or kind of poor neighborhoods, and then there's this influx of money that's poured into them to kind of redevelop them. You have areas where they have been historically, maybe have been a Black or minority owned or operated area, and then you have this influx of middle class and wealthy people moving in to these traditionally urban areas and kind of taking them over. What are you guys' thoughts on this whole concept of gentrification? Like when you hear that, like what comes to mind for you? Like what do you immediately think about when you hear the word gentrification? Or even if you have any experience or exposure to it, like what are your thoughts or feelings behind that whole process? We're gonna start with Isaiah again.
Okay. Well, many people view gentrification as a good thing. And, after all, they're bringing beauty to, low income neighborhoods and businesses, in poor neighborhoods. And, how could that be a bad thing in somebody's eyes that really doesn't understand gentrification? Except that the new arrivals drive many people out of the neighborhoods, homes that they have actually bought, that they actually have built, from the ground up. And these are these people's childhood homes. And, even some of these areas, like when they actually build up these apartments and these condos and they're charging $4K a month to rent these actual apartments, no one can actually afford those who actually live in these neighborhoods. So of course they bring in different people with, more resources to actually, move into these neighborhoods. And unfortunately, the people that actually grew and took a love for this neighborhood are actually pushed out. And some history behind that is that this has actually been going on for years, where they actually will zone people out and they will put people in a particular area and they will pay them to actually stay in this area. Like, I want you to stay in this area. You can't move here in the suburbs where I live at, but I'm going to pay you to stay over here. And once you move, the payment actually stops. And I think that it is wrong on so many ends, that so many people are like relinquished to poverty because they want that subsidized payment just to stay in this particular area, not to move out to the suburbs where it may be more nice. And for me, I couldn't see myself building in gentrification. I think all money isn't good money. And for me, I actually like to sleep at night.
Yeah. Maria, what are your thoughts on this whole gentrification process, or when you hear that word, like what does that mean to you? And also, even to take it a little bit further, do you see any, I guess, benefits, pros or cons to that whole concept?
Well, for me, when I hear gentrification, I automatically think of greed because that's really what it boils down to. I mean, you got people in a neighborhood who can't even afford to live in the same neighborhood they've been living in for years. They did that every time in Atlanta when they build a new stadium or something like that. There's even a lady, an older lady. My mom always talks about this with the Falcons. When they first built that dome, the very first one, they came in there and just, I mean, it was ridiculous. And she told them they would never win anything because they put so many people out. And look at the Falcons today. They said that lady cursed them. But they have been able to win a Super Bowl, I'm just saying. And that was back in the 90s. So, hey. But I just feel like it's greed. I feel like it's so, it's just not right. I understand if you want to come in and revitalize the community and do it for the right reasons and bring things up, great. But do it where the people that live in the community can actually come up as well. And it can be a win-win situation for everybody if it's done the proper way. But these companies that come in, they say, where's that? Okay, this land is cheaper over here. We can come in here and buy all these people out. They're ready to sell. If we come in and ask them, tell them we'll give them a certain amount of money. And just think about it. You've been owning your house and somebody comes in and says, hey, I'll give you $150,000 and you owe $20,000 on your house. And you're like, okay, fine. But I mean, how can you turn it down? So you're going to leave. And I just believe that, it's wrong. And like Isaiah says, you want to be able to sleep at night and you can't, y'all know I'm saying. You cannot be blessed doing people like that. You will not be blessed doing that. So that's my thing about that. Yeah.
That's the word.
That's what the word of God said. Although they don't know, but
Preach it, sister. Preach it. So Kim, gentrification, what does that mean to you? Do you see any pros and or cons to the whole concept of gentrification?
When I hear gentrification, the first thing I think about in the neighborhood is a Whole Foods grocery store. Like, if a Whole Foods pops up in one of these neighborhoods, I'm like, okay, y'all have been gentrified. So that's the first thing I always think about.
That's true.
I think that it's unfortunate for the residents that have lived there, like in real life, and like in this book for maybe 30 years, or you grew up in a neighborhood and all of a sudden, one, you don't recognize it, and two, the people that live there are leaving, and three, you kind of have to decide what you're going to do. And like Laria said, I mean, if you're in a lower income area, if somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, here's a check for $150 or $175, that's a lot of money for anybody to turn down. And unfortunately, I feel like it's in those instances where they're taking advantage of those residents, because that property for $175 turned around and be worth $800,000. The people that do live there and are renting and don't own, they just get priced out of their apartments and have to leave. So for me, I think it's unfortunate. There's a difference between, like Laria said again, gentrification and revitalizing an area. I think people should invest in these areas. I mean, the residents that live there now, who says they don't want to shop at a Whole Foods or don't want these nice restaurants or places to be? Just because they're in a lower income area doesn't mean that they don't want those same amenities themselves. So I think that we should look into revitalization and what that means to help people in the whole community come up together.
That's true.
Yeah, that's good.
That's true.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, it's we've read these other kind of historical books, and I'm a history guy. Even with the last book we covered, where historically you had people that were limited to only certain neighborhoods or certain areas within a town or a city, and again, they were considered urban areas. You had a huge influx of people that left the inner city to move to the suburbs. And now you're seeing the reverse trend of that, where people are moving back into the inner city, and these areas are now becoming, the it place to be, and all the development is happening around it. But it is a lot of greed and just there's so much money involved in this process that it really makes you question the true motivations and the intentions, of this. One thing even within this book, and I think you kind of mentioned it, like you get to a point where it's like this stuff seems unrealistic, but it's disheartening to think about it, but to know that greed and money motivates so much that I think Alyssa does do a good job of kind of highlighting this, that, these may not be just wild fabrications of our imaginations. Like, people may be going through these great lengths of literally, planning and plotting and starting riots and, taking these whole initiatives and, kidnapping people and like doing these things just to get these people out of these neighborhoods because they know how much more money they can make, how they can turn and flip these properties, and make a quick dollar.
Right.
And so you guys bring up a good point, the whole concept of gentrification versus like reinvestment and revitalization of an area to, try to develop it and bring it up for everyone to participate in it. I think that's one thing, but when you are literally taking over areas and pricing people out that may have had a long history, you see a lot of that in, California and Oakland, some of those historic areas where, they were really limited to, a certain group of people. But now, like I said, the money's coming in, they're able to buy the property up cheap and invest and throw these dollars at it. And you literally price the people out where they can't afford the taxes.
Right.
They can't afford to stay there. And the crazy thing is, like, this is not just an American problem. Like, this is an international problem and issue as well. Like, I visited South Africa a few years back, and they're seeing the same thing in those areas where you literally are just, people are coming in, they want to build condos and tear down these houses that were historically just kind of for a certain group of people. But like I said, development coming in, buying them cheap, building condos, and now it's a tourist attraction. And it's a sad thing, especially when you leave out the people that, have the history and know the history of these areas. So yeah, I agree with all you guys. All right. So look, for Friends of the Book podcast, we giving y'all books, current topics, relevant events that may be going on in our community, within our country, within this nation, across the world. And so again, we just wrapped up When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, and the topic of gentrification and what that means to us. So good discussion, guys. I appreciate y'all input. Appreciate it.
Good job, Chris. Appreciate you too.
All right, so look, if y'all been watching us for a while, y'all already know what time it is. Our favorite segment of the show. We have it every episode, which we call The Rant. 60 seconds, uninterrupted. We're not debating. We're not contesting. We're not arguing. We're just giving talk, discussion from the heart. So we coming back to my brother, the rant man himself, Mr. Isaiah Toots, killing these rants every episode. He's been educating us. He's been giving us new information. He's been enlightening us. And like I told y'all before, we never know what we're getting. But again, we're not debating it. We're not contesting it. So my brother, go on, do your thing. Starting now. Go.
The world watched hundreds of Haitians who traveled to the U.S. border to be turned away by aggression from the Border Patrol. And Haiti is only being punished because they were the first African-American country to actually be free in this world hemisphere. And I think that the U.S. policy towards Haiti has always been corrupt, and it doesn't have to be that way, because we know that the U.S. can do it. There's a way to do it, and there's just no will to do it. And after being denied their legal right to make an asylum claim, hundreds of Haitians were deported back to where they found their unlabeled belongings scattered on the ground. And Black asylum seekers have a right to be here. These people could have been provided with food, shelter, money, and medical aid. And I spoke previously that the United States has promised to bring 95,000 Afghans here. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be brought here. They should. That is the promise of the country. But if you can bring 95,000 Afghans here, why are you sending a small amount of Haitians back on an airplane to a country stricken in poverty? And that's that on that.
Thank you, brother. So once again, man, just educating us and enlightening us. Like I said, we should all be informed about what's going on, not with what's only within our country and in our neighborhoods, but across this world that we live in, and we share this space with other people of different backgrounds, different races, different religions, and we should all be about equity and equality. And so we have to be informed, and again, we have to be the catalyst for change that we want to see, whether it's locally or on a national or worldwide platform. So thank you again, brother, for educating us and schooling us once again with your rant.
Yes.
All right, so look, Four Friends in the Book podcast, we about to conclude this, but we got to tell y'all about the book that we got coming up next. So Isaiah, go on and tell them about what we're reading for next month.
Hey guys, before we let you go, as Chris stated, we wanted to actually tell you about the book that we're actually about to get into. I want to introduce our next book, which is Finna by Nate Marshall. Backstory on Nate Marshall: he's an award-winning artist, he's a professor, and he's from the South Side of Chicago. And Finna is actually a sophomore book, which is a book of poetry, and you actually don't want to miss it. Laria, when can they tune in?
You guys can tune in to watch Four Friends in a Book every third Thursday of the month. So put it in your phone, mark your calendar, do what you got to do to watch us every third Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, Four Friends in a Book. And if you aren't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we're trying to get 1,000 subscribers. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and send a link to your friends and have them join the Four Friends in a Book family.
All right, guys, as always, thank you for tuning in with us. Let's read, let's learn, let's grow, and let's have a discussion here on Four Friends in a Book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.